Hi, everyone. I'm Isabella, and today I'm going to be talking about my independent research that I have been conducting over the semester for American sexuality. And so what I've been looking at this semester is the concept of sexual health, sexual education, and offering it to younger children and the effects of that. And so my main research question was, is it beneficial to teach sexual health and sexual education to young age children, and how young would that age be appropriate? um, and so to dive a little deeper, I ask a few more questions through the research, and I want to find out what the impact of discussing sexual health is early on versus later on. And so throughout the semester, I have gotten an overwhelming amount of research suggesting that gradually introducing your children to sexual health from as early as 13 months could yield a great benefit in intimate relationships, in self-autonomy, self-esteem, things of that nature. And so we dive a little bit deeper. And when a lot of people think about sexual health and education, they kind of skip over the basics, right? And so when we say we should be teaching sexual health and education to children as young as 13 months, it has to do with anatomy, right? And so it's very important to be able to identify every part on your own body for self-autonomy. And so when looking at early sex education, it's really important to focus on the building blocks, the basic steps, and that should be accessible to children as young as 13 months. And so by 13 months, children should have a more conclusive understanding of their body parts. And so, like I said, early sex ed education makes us more sexually literate and safe. It encourages healthy relationships. And so often the discourse also involves conversations around it being inappropriate to teach younger children about sex and sexual education. And beyond just anatomy and healthy relationships, it's inappropriate to mention sexual initiative. And so there has been many studies conducted, and it finds that from ages as early as 5, children can and should understand that there is sexuality within certain relationships. So as ages as young as 5, the conversation around how humans reproduce, how babies are made, where they stay, that is already an idea that is conceptualized in a child's head as young as 5. And so the idea that individuals are too young to understand these concepts and it may be inappropriate kind of takes away the educational value of knowing biologically where we come from, how we get there. And so moving on, it's important to also ask who influences young Americans in their understanding of sex. And so public medication .ncbi did a study on specifically Latina communities, so Latin women in both America and South America. And they produced the findings that parents, peers, family, and religion often influences young Latina women. And that is a bit of a niche, but I feel like it also is a larger scope of the general expectations of young women and also men in public schools. And as you go on, to look more broadly, not even only specifically at a one group of individuals, Lumen Learning also suggests that young Americans are impacted by cultural, political, and legal philosophical, moral, and ethical aspects of life. However, in more recent years, peers and the media have both emerged as two of the strongest influences among young Americans. And so this is important to take into consideration, right? Because we think of what we allow young children to see, what we choose to teach young children ourselves. And so there's this general idea and research around whether it would be beneficial for us to teach young children about sexual health early on and gradually in age, so that by the time they're influenced by outside sources such as media and their peers, they already have a general understanding and self-autonomy to go ahead and make those decisions. And so this was a study conducted in 2008 that was published by Portar, Courtois, and Rouche. And so moving on, we'd like to just I'd like to look at it as a case study now, and compare curriculums where education starts early in America versus where it doesn't. And so to date, fewer than half of school districts nationwide have adopted the National Sex Education Standards for comprehensive sex education. And comprehensive sex education navigates away from abstinence-only education and includes lessons about diverse sexual orientation, self-esteem, and safety, contraceptives, STIs, STDs. And so according to the ACOG organization, between 1996 and 2010, there was a strong emphasis during sex ed courses on abstinence only until marriage. And this was because of federal funding. Programs that were federally funded had to be abstinence driven in the 90s, all the way up until 2010. And so we could see through 1996, from 1996 through 2010, the difference in performance in student body, personal home lives, social lives. And so schools with more comprehensive sexual education programs actually produce improved self-protective skills within their students. It improves their knowledge of what is appropriate and what is inappropriate touching, and it increases parent-child communications. And so we see a general also decrease in intimate partner violence when at a young age we are gradually introduced to the idea of intimacy and interactions and relationships. And so when we are gradually introduced to this idea, by the time we are young adults, by the time we are preteens, by the time we are in serious relationships in high school or middle school, we already have a general understanding of what we deserve, what is right, what is within our rights, what is safe and what is healthy. There also, according to the Montclair study on whether or not sex ed should be introduced in kindergarten, there was a strong evidence to suggest that there's better mental health amongst LGBTQ communities when there are better implemented sexual education programs early on. It also decreases the use of drugs and alcohol before sex, and also increases the student population. And so these are all main driving points that kind of deliver us to our answer that we're looking for. Is it beneficial to teach children at a young age about sexual health and education? And so there have also been studies between 2004 and 2005 that analyze abstinence-only programs and how they don't really help young people. Rather, they delay the onset of sexual intercourse, and they also increase risk-taking behaviors amongst young children or young people. And so it's the Waxman report that was produced in December 2004. And it basically found that abstinence only until marriage programs were often inaccurate and sometimes dishonest. And so it would be beneficial of us as parents, as peers, as a general society, to in the homes early on and personally to give us autonomy, introduce sexual education and health in a way that navigates from abstinence and navigates away from the idea of putting a taboo on sexual intercourse or relations in general. And so that kind of delivered me to the conclusion. And out of all of this information that I've gathered, although there has been historically abstinence-only programs in the past, the data has proven that those programs did not help young children or young adults prepare for later on in life. And it also lacked the necessary lessons in gaining self-autonomy and self-protective skills. And so that has been my research for American sexuality. Thank you.